Hi. Sorry that took me so long. Welcome to Primal Weight Loss YouTube, and this is also going out on Facebook and somewhere else, I think Instagram. So I won't be able to see your comments on here, and I really don't know why. So I have to check my phone periodically. My apologies. So today I want to talk about fertility. Specifically for females, but also probably a little bit for males. And I want to share my story, which I haven't done because my story, it's long. Well, I guess it's not really a long story, but it's just like a long ago, and it's painful because it was a painful time. So don't talk about it that much. I have a daughter now, and it took over 5 years to have her, and it sucks. So if you're going through the pain of infertility, then I've been there and I know what it feels like, and I know that there's really nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And so if you're suffering from PCOS or endometriosis, adenomyosis, and ovulatory cycles, I had all of those things, and so they can be overcome because I overcame them. It can happen. Your doctors will tell you, your doctors will help you manage them. That's what doctors do. They don't really know what to do with you until you get sick. And then they know to give you pills or surgery, which is what they did for me. I had a lot of surgeries. I think I had 2 on my ovaries. I think I've had like 3 or 4 on my uterus, 5 if you count my C-section. And just all kinds of shit. But none of it helped me get pregnant. And so what I should have done is change my diet. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. But first, I want to talk really briefly about my CGM because I'm nerding out about it super hard. If you didn't come here to hear about CGM, I promise this will be brief. CGM is a continuous glucose monitor. It is this thing on my arm right here, and it is a tiny needle sticking into my interstitial fluid, and it measures my blood glucose all the time. Am I diabetic? No. So why do I care? Because a CGM is sort of the best way that we have to measure what our insulin is doing. And that is interesting to us as people who are dealing with hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. So just really briefly, I wanted to say, if you are interested in that, you can go to Primal Weight Loss and see all of my nerd posts about it. Bottom line, I'm in ketosis, which means, or I was until I ate this morning. I was on a 72-hour fast. Once I got into ketosis, once you get into ketosis, your glucose usually gets pretty low and stays low. And so we're interested in not just the postprandial glucose spike, but how long your glucose stays up and stuff like that. So if you're interested in all that nerdy shit, please go check out Primal Weight Loss because I'm posting madly about it. I have this thing on for like another 12 days and I'm doing all kinds of experiments. And by the way, artificial sweeteners, even stevia, does seem to spike glucose. So that sucks. Anyway, so let's talk about fertility. I will tell you my story as briefly as possible so you know where I am coming from and why I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I lost 125 or so pounds starting in 2020. But before that, I was obese my whole life. Started to get fat. At least when I noticed it, is when I was 8 years old. Obesity is a multifactorial chronic condition. It is primarily a disease of hormone dysregulation, and it usually takes decades to fully develop. So I did not really reach my full obese potential until I was in my 20s, but it started when I was about 8. And around puberty, especially in girls, you start to see more of the manifestations of the hormone dysfunction. And I was no exception to that. At 13, I had what they call prepartum macromastia, huge boobs, like double T at 13. And my hair started to fall out at 13. And I got my period pretty early at 11. Now, we know now that early onset of menses is directly related to body fat percentage. Around the turn of the 20th century, the average female in the US started to bleed at around 16, which is why this whole like trad fantasy of the 14-year-old wife is mostly bullshit. We didn't bleed that early until recently. And there's actually a direct correlation, a direct causative correlation between increased body fat percentage and menses onset. It's measurable that about, what was it? A 1%, every 1% increase in body fat speeds the onset of menses by 6 months. Like it's a very straight line on the graph, right? Like we can see the direct correlation. So this this early onset puberty thing that we're seeing in girls, these 9, 10, 11-year-olds, now the average age is like 11. This is directly related to the fact that kids are fat now. There's now pediatric stroke units, there's now pediatric heart attacks, and the onset of pediatric type 2 diabetes has the percentage increase is in the hundreds or thousands. It's retarded. So I was one of those kids, but because I was like big and strong, it wasn't as obvious. I wasn't just one of those like shapeless, plump little sphere kids. So, and my mom was very busy. During that part of my childhood, she was single, and she had 4 kids, and she was hustling and just trying to live. And so, and this was during the low fat era. So what did we eat? We ate healthy shit. We ate Yoplait yogurt, no fat, tons of sugar. We ate Lean Pockets, and we ate fish sticks, and we ate, frozen pizza and grilled cheese sandwiches. We ate a lot of carbs and a lot of sugar because we were told back then that this was the heart healthy diet, right? Like cut your saturated fat, eat margarine. Everybody had the big brown tub of country crock, which is just vegetable oil with yellow dye in it. So wax, basically. Anyway, we ate bullshit is my point. And so I was nutritionally, and I was allergic to cow's milk. So my formula was soy when I was a baby. I'm sure that didn't help. So I was kind of doomed, and I have a genetic predisposition towards obesity. Both my parents were lean, but they got fat. My dad, not until really recently. He's, in his 60s. And then my mom, when she had her 3rd pregnancy with twins, she never really, that was the hormonal switch for her. And she was in her late 20s at that point. So I had a genetic predisposition, and I was eating garbage. And so it was, it happens. So, I'm going to press fast forward here and go to my 20s. And I talked about this on a recent live stream. I had a period for 18 months. And nobody could tell me how to stop it, except they were like, hey, take birth control pills. And I was like, hey, I don't want to do that. Those are garbage. And I wasn't even Catholic then. I just really hated birth control. And because I was really fat, I was scared of having a heart attack or a blood clot or something. So I didn't want to take birth control pills. I was like, surely there has to be some way to, sorry, I'm looking to see if there's any comments on this stream. Okay, that's me talking. I guess I'll just have to wait till later and answer your comments. Sorry, guys. I'll have to fix this in StreamYard. It says I'm supposed to be able to see comments, but I don't. Can't post comments to some destinations. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out later. So they told me that I could have a uterine ablation to stop my period, which that's basically where they sandblast out the lining of your uterus and you can never have kids. But I was like 28 and I didn't have kids and I wanted them one day. So I was like, nah, girl. And they never did an ultrasound. I think someone did mention PCOS to me. And so I went home and Googled it after like a year and a half of bleeding, pretty much nonstop, and got really, really, really anemic. And then I looked it up on the internet, and the internet was like, say, girl, you should just stop eating carbs because PCOS is caused by insulin resistance, and you can treat that with a low carbohydrate diet. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, no one's mentioned that to me, but I'll try that. And so I stopped eating carbs, and I stopped bleeding like 3 days later. And so that was honestly, I had done a low carb thing before, and that's the only time that I'd ever lost weight. I was in high school or like right after high school. And I did, back then it was called the grapefruit diet. It was a shit ton of weight, like that. And I was like, oh my God, this works. But it didn't really make sense to me because all my life I'd watched my mom do low-fat diets and walk 3 miles a day and drink Slim Fast shakes. So I thought that the way that you're supposed to lose weight was by cutting calories and working out, which we now know is a bullshit. So I did the low carb thing and I knew it worked, but everyone, and some people still say this now. This was in like the late 90s, and everyone was like, that's a fad diet. It'll take the weight off, but it won't stay off, and it'll hurt your heart, blah, blah, blah. So it's supposed to be something that you did temporarily. And they would always emphasize, like, you have to come off it really soon, or your heart will explode or whatever. Now we know that's not true. So I knew that low carb worked for me as far as weight loss. And I was like, oh, so it does other stuff too. Cool. That was really the beginning of me getting very interested in nutrition. I did the low carb thing. I stopped bleeding and I lost some weight, but I didn't really keep it up. But over the next year, I got really into, reading about insulin and insulin resistance and what it was doing to my body. And that's when I discovered the carnivore thing. I found this was before Facebook, or like early Facebook, but people didn't really use it. And MySpace was still around. And so I'm super old. And so I was reading the forums, because there's this internet forum called Zeroing In on Health. And all these people were zero carb. They weren't eating any carbs at all. They were just eating meat. And I was like, holy shiznit, this kind of makes sense. I kept reading about the science behind it. And I was like, I read about it for like a year almost. And I lurked on the forum and whatever. And then finally I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Because I'm very much like a cold turkey, all or nothing person. I just did it. September 2010. And for the next 10 months, I did not eat anything that wasn't from an animal or had been an animal. And I didn't cheat one single time. I'm talking about like not a sip of iced tea with a packet of sweetener in it. Nothing. Nothing that tasted sweet past my lips. Nothing that wasn't from an animal. In 10 months, I lost 70 pounds. Didn't exercise, although I found as I got lighter that I started to want to. I found myself one day, I worked at a live music venue, and I was going backstage one day. The venue was empty, and I was just walking through the big like courtyard, and all of a sudden I just started skipping. I'll never forget that moment, because I was like my body wanted to move. Because see, there's this misconception that people get fat because they stop moving, but it's the other way around. People fucking stop moving because they get fat. Little kids want to run around and play. They stop because it stops being comfortable when they get fat. It's hard to move your body. We're telling people who weigh 250 pounds to go pound the fucking pavement with their big fat feet. They need to lose weight first. Lose the weight first. Exercise doesn't do much for weight loss anyway. Exercise is great. You should do it every day. It's really good for a number of things. When it comes to weight loss, it has little effect. And all the leading authorities on obesity recognize this now. So get some weight off and then you'll be able to exercise. So I lost 70 pounds, but I plateaued at like 220. And I never really got below that. Not long after that, I got married. And that's when I really started trying to get pregnant, like in earnest. I already knew because of my history that I was probably going to have trouble, but I didn't realize how much trouble I was going to have. We pretty much started trying to conceive on our honeymoon night. Neither one of us were virgins by any means, but we did not have sex on our wedding night. And so pretty much right then we started okay, let's do this. I was 33 and he was 42. And we were like, let's have a baby, man. And I went to the doctor. I was living in Mississippi at that time. And I just had a typical OBGYN. They don't know shit. They don't know shit. They can take a baby out of you. They can help you make sure that your baby is healthy while it's in there. But if there's something going wrong, I've never had an OBGYN who knew what the fuck they were doing. Even my NAPRO doctor, and I love him, Dr. Jones, he's a great guy. I mean, we went to the same church. He's an old, I think he's like 60s Catholic gentleman with like 7 grandkids, and he's wonderful. And he would hold my hands and pray before I would go into surgery, many surgeries. And I love him, but he told me to go on a plant-based diet. So this first doctor put me on Clomid, which if you've ever had anything to do with infertility, you know it's a very common drug. It's supposed to induce ovulation. Before he put me on the Clomid, he did an operation called Laparoscopic Ovarian drilling. It's an old operation that they don't do much anymore. He did not tell me this, but one of the side effects of it is that you can have pretty extensive scarring afterward, which I believe I did. So they basically take a cautery tool and they burn holes in your ovaries, and it's supposed to reduce the bulk of them and help the egg to get out through all the old cysts. So basically what happens when you have polycystic ovary syndrome, I'm going to make this super, super brief because it's more complicated than this with the hormones that are working, but pretty much your body will make cysts, but they never pop. So it's normal for a woman to have an ovarian cyst every month. It's called a follicle, and that's what the egg comes out of. But if your insulin is too high, you will have what's called follicular arrest. And the hormones don't work right, and so the follicle stops growing and the egg never comes out. You don't ovulate. You can't get pregnant without an egg. That's what was happening to me, but I didn't know that. No one ever said follicular arrest. No one ever said insulin. They don't know, so they don't tell you. All they have are drugs. So I got a lot of drugs, and I got a lot of surgeries. The Clomid made me ovulate and conceive, but it was a blighted ovum, and so I miscarried at 7 or 8 weeks. It was a horrific miscarriage. I basically had contractions for like 3 days, and the doctor had given me the option of just passing it at home, and I took it, but it wasn't passing. So I ended up having to go have the surgery anyway. And the verse said the twilight sleep didn't work on me, so I was awake through the whole thing. Obviously, I didn't feel it, but I remember the entire thing. Of course, at this point, my entire life, I was a housewife. I was living away from my family with my new husband, and my whole life was centered around getting pregnant. So this was a crushing blow. I had also gained weight. In between meeting my husband and getting married, I'd gained about 30 pounds. I was back up around 250. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't coping well. And throughout my my ensuing 4 years or so of fertility journey, I would stay in like the mid 200s, 230 to 250. I ended up having a lot of fertility treatment through natural reproductive technology, which was kind of invented by Catholics because they can't give you birth control pills, and they don't do abortions, so they have to kind of work around all that stuff. And so they, it's sort of a work with your body type of thing where you chart your cycle and stuff like that. Like I said, I loved my NAPRO doctor, but he never seemed to get the message that I wasn't ovulating. And I got it. I could see it. I would go in month after month after month. I would go in day after day after day. And even I would be late for work or miss work when I was working. And he would do a transvaginal ultrasound where they stick the wand inside you and they look to see what's happening. And he would say, "Oh, your follicle's about to pop." And I would be like, "It's not going to. It never does." And it never did. And we just kept doing the same thing. My estradiol was high because my estrogen was too high. My progesterone was too low. There was just a lot going on. And what I needed was diet. What I needed was nutrition to correct it because it's a nutritional problem. It was a problem of hyperinsulinemia. But he didn't know that. And I didn't really get that at the time either. Like I had a vague awareness, but so I won't go into any more detail about all the many, many things I went through trying to get pregnant. I had an HSG, hysterosalpingogram, which is where they put fluid up through your uterus, through your tubes to see if they're blocked. I had one partial blockage. At that point, I also seemed to have pelvic adhesions, which is scar tissue in your pelvis. So my left ovary kind of like hangs out behind my bladder or something. And then it turned out that I had endometriosis, which they can guess that you have it, but they can't really know until they go in and do surgery. And so I had a robotic surgery, and my doctor was new to the surgery. And so I was under for 7 hours. And because they put you in a harness and turn you upside down and inflate your abdomen with air to do the surgery. And I was hanging on this shoulder, and I weighed 230 pounds. And so my shoulder has been permanently injured by that. And then I ended up having to have a second surgery because they weren't able to get all of the endometriosis. I had it all over the outside of my uterus and my bladder. This is an inflammatory condition. This is also determined by nutrition. And then after my daughter was born, which I'll get to that in a second, I was diagnosed with adenomyosis, which is so endometriosis is when your uterine lining grows outside your uterus, and adenomyosis is when the lining grows down into the muscle of your uterus. So the only way they could treat that is by having me take progesterone ingestions and an anti-clotting, no, not anti-clotting, I forget, some pill. I didn't take it. So I took progesterone injections 3 days a month for the next 2 years, something like that. Yeah, 2 years. And then I got to quit recently because all of this got better. That's the end story. I wasn't able to conceive naturally. I ended up going to Prague, Brno. I flew into Prague, took a train to Brno, Czech Republic, to a fertility clinic, and I adopted a donor embryo, and that's how I got my daughter. She's not mine genetically. I was still fat when I got pregnant. I actually did a month of strict carnivore, no dairy, meat and water only for a month before I went to Prague and got down back to 220 so that I could get my BMI low enough that they would take me as a patient. I was surprised they took me as a patient because of my complicated history, but this was before the adenomyosis, and I had a small uterine fibroid at the time, but other than that, everything was fine. My ovaries were not fine, but my uterus is fine, and still is. And so they took me as a patient, and man, once I was able to bypass the whole ovulation thing, my body worked like gangbusters. You put an embryo in there, and I will grow you a baby. I'll make eyeballs and a brain and a pancreas, and my body material made this absolutely beautiful, perfect baby girl. And my pregnancy, I was already hypertensive before I got pregnant. It got worse while I was pregnant. I never developed gestational diabetes, although I think I was probably diabetic. That's another episode having to do with, they only measure blood glucose and not insulin when they diagnose diabetes. I have a feeling that you can be diabetic and have a normal oral glucose tolerance test. It's actually quite common. And I think I probably was diabetic when I was pregnant, but even before and after. So I had my daughter by C-section at 37 weeks. My pregnancy was very difficult because I was very unhealthy. Because of the fact that I was hyperinsulinemic while I was pregnant, my daughter will be at 40% higher risk for obesity as an adult, which is why I am the way I am about what she eats. And I fight about this with her dad because, sugar, ice cream, she's a kid, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It absolutely matters what you feed your kid at 30 and sooner. It absolutely 100% matters. That is an addictive, toxic substance. So what I'm trying to do now is we have sugar-free days, and then we have days where you can have one sweet thing, one small sweet thing, and then we have another sugar-free day. And so when she does end up going to her grandmother's house or going to a birthday party, I don't feel so terrible about it because unfortunately we are a nation of addicts and our lives revolve around junk food. So if you are struggling with one of these issues, let me talk about where we are today. I've talked a lot about how I got healthy. I had a sort of hypertensive crisis one day and blacked out behind the wheel I was driving. And I was also suicidally depressed at that time. And so it was around that time that I started doing keto and fasting. And the fasting is really what saved me. As much as I think that the carnivore diet or an animal-based diet, low carb, high fat, ketogenic, etc., these are all great things in a lot of ways for people who are metabolically dysfunctional. You do have to cut carbs. For me, it was the fasting that I needed because I am metabolically deranged enough that I have to fast in order to lose weight. And a lot of you will be the same way, unfortunately. Fasting saved my life, honestly. And I slowly worked my way up from, a 16.8 to 18.6 to to 24s. So, oh my God, I could do a 24 and then 48s. And then I did a bunch of 48s in a row. And then I did a 72. And then I did a bunch of 72s in a row. And then I lost another 20 pounds over like the last year. So right now I'm sitting at about, I've lost about 125, 130, something like that. And I think I was around I remember it was 270 or 280 when I started at the very end of December 2019, and really started the fasting in early 2020. And I did all that fasting during the COVID lockdown when I was alone in a 1-bedroom apartment with a 2-year-old. So I don't want to hear your excuse. If I can do that, then you can do anything. So now, where is my hormonal health now? Well, according to all of the signs and the little sticks that you can pee on, I seem to be ovulating. And of course, I would have to go, try to get pregnant or have a transvaginal ultrasound to know for sure. But I do seem to be ovulating. As far as I know, for the first time in my life, I've never known myself to ever have ovulated. And trust me, I've checked. I've literally watched on a screen at my ovary with the follicle. So this is new, which is ironic at my age, but this is the irony of my life, is that all of these important things that I missed, it's a tragedy that I missed these things in the prime of my life, that I wasn't able to ovulate, and I wasn't able to conceive on my own, and I wasn't able to pass on my genetic material. As much as I love my daughter, and her genetic material appears to be far superior to mine, but the way that I am able to cope with that loss, which is huge. It's a huge loss that I struggle with like a death, or it's a major grief in my life that I'm working through. But the way that I'm able to cope with that is by knowing that I can use it. I can be useful through it, and I can see someone dealing with what I went through and help them. So, women who are struggling with infertility have a special place in my heart. Unfortunately, so many of you are so unwilling to take advice out of the mainstream. Many of you aren't even aware of how metabolically deranged you are, or how hormonally dysfunctional you are. I'm around hormonally deranged women all day long at my job. We're all surrounded by obese women in their prime childbearing years. And I look at the way their fat is distributed on their body, the way they eat, the way they talk about their cycles, the way they use oral hormonal contraception. I just observe these things, and I think, you probably could not get pregnant right now. And of course I could be wrong. But especially the way they talk about their cycles, and especially the way, there's certain ways that fat is distributed where that their insulin is just through the roof. The big belly fat, and the kind of hump right here, the dowager hump that you get, and a fat deposit right here, and the brown marks on the neck, which are related to insulin resistance, and the hormonal acne, and the facial hair here that I see on them. It's obvious, and they don't realize that if and when they finally get around to trying to have a kid, they're going to have trouble. So if you're having trouble, you have to understand that insulin is your enemy, and you have to get it low. So the first thing that you need to do is cut your carbs. And you've been hearing about this for years, I'm sure. It's so funny right now, we have this split between what the mainstream medical establishment is telling people and what popular culture is telling people, because now you still go to your doctor and these idiots are like, well, you need to eat less fat and eat less and move more. And then you go to a bookstore and the entire health and wellness diet nutrition cookbook section is keto, 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 keto. And you go to the magazines at Target and it's keto, 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 keto. So there's what people are actually figuring out is working, and there's what the bestsellers are on Audible, and what all the podcasts are, what everyone is talking about on social media, and there's what your dumbass doctor is still telling you from 40 years ago that we know for a fact doesn't fucking work. So it's really a shame. And then people, people are sitting there with like 20 pounds of pure visceral fat, probably have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, fasting blood glucose of 140, and they tell me my doctor doesn't think I should fast. Okay, your doctor's a fucking retard. Your personal doctor is probably a fucking retard. I've had some doctors who really thoroughly cared and tried, but they didn't fucking know what they were talking about. And I know that now because I figured it out on my own. I did the opposite of what they told me, and look at me. My doctor, when I went back to, so the doctor who told me to fast, I mean, bless up, right? The doctor who told me to fast, he spent an hour with me that day, and I never saw him again. After that, I only saw his nurse practitioner. But that first visit, he spent like an hour with me. He changed my hypertension meds, which clearly weren't working, and he put me on an antidepressant, which I took for like the next 4 months, and then I threw it away. And he put me on, and he fixed my thyroid medicine, and he sat there and talked to me for a long time, and he was like, look, I'm a weight loss guy. You're probably depressed because you're really overweight. And I was like, getting right to the point, are we? And he showed me this chart that was like from the CDC or whatever, that was like, it had like it was like a BMI chart, and he pointed to my weight. He like looked at my weight, and he put his little finger down like way over in the red. And he was like, this is you, and you need to be here, which is 153. That's like the maximum healthy weight for my height. Actually, at my age, it's 159, but 153 is like under 30 or whatever. And I thought I would never, I literally laughed. I laughed because at that point I was like 270, 280. So I laughed at that because I could not remember a time when the scale had ever said anything that low. I couldn't remember the scale ever having a 1. I'd only ever been in the 200s. So when I finally saw 153 on the scale, I remember just being like, damn. I keep meaning to send an email to him and just be like, hey, Dr. Shepard. When I went back to his office, though, I was visiting his nurse practitioner one day for something else, bronchitis or something. And he saw me, and I was like, hey, do you remember me? And he was like, oh, yeah. I could tell he didn't remember me. And I was like, I came in here when I blacked out in the car with my baby because I was so hypertensive. And they sent me here. And, well, actually, I went there just because he took my insurance and he was close to my house. But thank God, And he told me, eat keto or basically low carb and eat less than 40 net carbs a day. And once a week, you need to fast. And I was like, because in the carnivore community, they tell you not to fast. Obesity is internal starvation, and fasting is not necessary. You can get your insulin low enough eating meat, blah, blah, blah. None of that's true, honestly. I mean, not to me. Look, if you can keep eating meat and lose all the weight you want to lose, eating as much as you want, carnivore, great. It's actually not great. I think that fasting is natural and good for human beings. But I had been, inculcated in the carnivore dogma. And so I was like, oh, I don't do that. And the truth is that I was a food addict, and the thought of laying down to bed hungry, I was like, I can't do that. I would always have a little something to eat right before bed, which I know is fucking terrible, right? And so the first time I did that, I was really scared I was going to get hypoglycemic. But if you cut your carbs, you won't get hypoglycemic. So if you're trying to get pregnant, cutting your carbs is really the first step. You do that, you're going to get adapted to burning fat instead of sugar. Like if you look at my CGM now, my continuous glucose monitor, my blood glucose is very low, very low. Like if I were running on a glucose metabolism, like normal people walking around eating carbs, and my blood glucose got down into the 50s, I would be sweating, shaking, maybe having seizures and having to go to the ER. But I'm not running a glucose metabolism. I'm running on ketones, And so I don't, so I'm fine. So the first thing you need to do is get fat adapted. And then when you go to fast, you'll just keep running on ketones and it won't hurt. You won't feel as hungry. The hardest thing for me to cut has been artificial sweeteners is always hard, and also just drinking stuff. So it's really hard to get yourself to drink only water or electrolytes. But once you get that, and once you're able to do it, it's very liberating to know that you don't need anything. You just need a sip of water when you're thirsty. It sounds as restrictive as it sounds. It's freedom. It's freedom from food addiction. And yes, it hurts at first because we're all dopamine addicts, and most of us are food addicts. And you get that pleasure reward in your brain, and you get used to it, and you're like a rat pressing a lever, and you want to keep going back to it. But once you free yourself from that, you're truly free. I think that we should try to fast from everything that we depend on, our phones, our coffee, everything that we can't do without. We should do without sex, Many religions have understood this from time immemorial, and during the Orthodox fast, they abstain from certain foods, animal products, alcohol, oils. Traditionally, they abstain from secular entertainment, from sex, and it's good for us. I've been reading this book by Dr. Anna Lemke called Dopamine Nation. I'll have to do a different live stream on that. But if you're here trying to get pregnant, I want you to learn from what I went through and understand that insulin is the culprit, probably, for your infertility. And if it's not, you won't really know until you try fixing that first. Because you're going to go to the doctor and they're going to try to diagnose you with things, and they're going to try to give you surgeries and drugs, and they're going to try to sell you IVF, when all you might need to do is cut carbs and fast. And this is true even if you are, not obese, not overweight. You should still try fixing your diet, because there's a lot of tofis walking around, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, and you look okay, but you're hormonally wrecked and you're metabolically not healthy. And you put a CGM on and you go, holy shit, this person is borderline diabetic, or, this person has elevated liver enzymes, or this person is, just, they look okay, but on the inside, they're not okay. We see it all the time now. So you may be thinking, I'm exempt from all that because I'm thin, but you're not. If you're eating trash, if you're eating trash, then your health is trash, period. I don't care how much you work out. I don't give a shit. If you're eating garbage, your health is garbage. It might not have caught up with you yet because humans are so adaptive. And what are good fat sources besides butter and cheeses? I eat steak every day. I cut way back on the eggs so I can feed them non-soy protein. Good fat sources. I don't know why we think that we need a bunch of variety. This is a modern thing. Because it used to be that, we had our food source that was where we lived, and that's what we fucking ate. And now we can go to the grocery store and see the plethora, right? And we're like, oh my God, what do I choose? What fat sources do I choose? But so think ancestrally. What did our ancestors eat? We evolved for 2.5 million years as hunter-gatherers, right? And then for like 10,000 years, we had agriculture. And we got fairly, somewhat adapted to that. But then we've only had industry for 200 years? 250? I don't know. And so our genes can't cope with it. So if you need industry to make it, avoid it. Our ancestors, insofar as they ate vegetables, they ate them as subsistence food. It was what you ate when meat was scarce, and you didn't eat them in large amounts, and you certainly didn't seek them out first. You certainly didn't, be like, oh, get that fatty meat out of my face. I'm going to chew on this fucking root. Our ancestors wouldn't have done that because it would have been contrary to their survival instinct to not choose the, highly caloric, nutrient-dense food source. Our ancestors probably weren't sitting around rendering tallow. And so to me, while tallow is perfectly fine to rub on your skillet and cook your steak with, there's also nothing wrong with just eating the fat that's on the steak. I never really add fat to my steak. You can cook it in butter. You can cook it in tallow. You can melt some of the fat off the edge and cook it in that. Butter's great. I like Kerrygold butter. It's grass-fed. It has a better texture and taste than most butters. I have some that I got from a local dairy co-op. I have some like fresh local butter. It's not as good as Kerrygold. It doesn't have the rich color because I think they may have been grain finished cows. So cheese is fine. Cheese is some people don't react well to cheese or to dairy at all. But I think it's okay. I certainly wouldn't be drinking milk or half and half. I think some heavy cream is probably okay. If you're eating only animals, I would kind of stop there and I wouldn't fuck around with pork fat because of the linoleic acid, which I've talked about exhaustively on other streams. But yeah, I think you could probably stop there if you're trying to avoid the proteins, the dairy proteins. Then you could just do ghee, the clarified butter, or you can make your own. Eggs, yeah, I don't really do eggs. I did at Easter, because Easter, Pascha for us. I made a shit ton of deviled eggs with keto mayo. If you're looking for an occasional mayo to use that's not terrible and full of seed oils and keeps you keto, Chosen Foods keto mayo is made with coconut oil and it's excellent. So if you're trying to get your wife pregnant and you want to maximize your fertility, this would be a great thing for you guys to do together. Before you start going to doctors and saving up money for IVF and buying a bunch of fucking supplements that are probably redundant, you both need to get healthy. You both need to think about your insulin first. Insulin first. It is the granddaddy of hormones when it comes to fat storage and metabolism. Once you get your insulin squared away, then you can start looking at your other hormones. But I guarantee you, if you don't start there, you're not going to be successful. Okay? You have to get your insulin regulated first. You have to cut carbs. If you're going to do nothing else tomorrow, if you're going to do nothing else and you're trying to get healthy and you're trying to become parents, seed oils, refined carbohydrates, refined sugars. Okay? Seed oil, sugar, refined carbs. If you still want to eat some carbs that come from nature, if you're eating whole foods the way they come from nature, then you're eating foods the way that God gave them to you. All right. So like if you were going to eat a potato, that is 100 million times better than bread made with potato flour. Because once you refine it, again, industry, once you pulverize it into a super fine powder and you eat it, and the way that it's absorbed directly into your bloodstream is totally different than eating a potato. All right. Any kind of flour is bad. It's addictive, literally addictive. It acts on your brain's pleasure center. Flour is not good. Any kind of refined carb is not good. Anything made with a hydrogenated oil or a seed oil, any kind of cracker, any kind of cookie, I don't give a shit if it's gluten-free. Miss me with the gluten-free shit. You can be eating gluten-free, just like being vegan. Oh, I'm vegan, so I'm healthy. No, you can eat vegan and eat garbage all day long. You can eat gluten-free and eat garbage all day long. You can eat keto and eat garbage all day long. If it's still got seed oils and refined bullshit in it, and also all the vast array of artificial sweeteners. I was trying to fuck around with stevia because I'm like, oh, it's kind of natural. And, when you look at the studies, it appears to not spike insulin. But you don't know. There's so much bioindividuality when it comes to insulin regulation. And for me, my blood glucose goes up, which means that I'm going to release insulin to deal with that glucose. So I cannot have it. it's really liberating to break yourself from the taste of sweet. So even if you're eating artificial sweeteners, what you're doing is you're keeping that craving alive. Okay? So you're still going to walk around wanting sweet shit because you tasted something that tasted like sugar. Our bodies are so sensitive to anything sweet because sugar is a chemically addictive toxin, right? Gary Talbs wrote a book called The Case Against Sugar, and you absolutely have to read it. And if you do get pregnant and have a baby, don't give your baby any. So refined carbs and sugar and seed oil. Sugar's not natural. Okay, it's not natural. Don't tell me that sugar is natural. Are you growing sugar cane in your backyard? Did you refine that and make sugar crystals out of it in your kitchen? They do that in factories. It's not natural. It's no more natural than high fructose corn syrup. And there's very little difference between them. High fructose corn syrup has like 5% more fructose, right? So just because it came from sugar cane or sugar beet and not corn, it doesn't make it better. So, I'm drinking the Coca-Cola with the real sugar. Okay. I don't know what kind of points you think you're going to get from that. Like, while they're sawing your foot off from diabetes. But I drink the real sugar Coke. Cool. So, cut those things and, cut back on, if you just do those 3 things, you're already going to get better if you're eating a standard American diet now. If you are really actively trying to lose a lot of weight, then you're going to have to cut carbs. I don't think everybody needs to be carnivore forever, but some people who have a lot of weight to lose would really benefit from cutting most plants because plants have a lot of problematic anti-nutrients and natural defense mechanisms that act as pesticides, and we are pests. Often stevia packets have erythritol. Yeah, erythritol, stevia. There's 2 problems. Well, the main problem is what they call cephalic phase response, where your body tastes sweet and your brain is like, oh, hey, we're about to eat sugar. Release the insulin. And you release insulin, and then you don't get any actual sugar, but you still release a little. Now, if you had eaten sugar, your body would have released more insulin to metabolize that glucose, but you still got that first wave. And it's not as much as eating sugar, but it's just a little bit. So I had like a little bit of spike when I would have it. So anyway, I'm actually about to see, you guys want me to check my CGM in real time here? Because I really want to see what the honey, I'm doing so many experiments on myself. Paul Saladino is all about eating honey because he's like, it's actually kind of carnivore. The Hadza, the hunter-gatherers, they seek it out and it's pretty, it's natural and our ancestors would have gone after it. Okay, so I had a higher spike from fruit than from honey. So my fruit, when I ate steak and berries and a peach and some nuts, that was my breakfast, and I was breaking a 72-hour fast, my glucose peaked at 121. When I ate, 5 hours later, I ate a little bit of full-fat yogurt with honey, raw organic honey, and my glucose peaked at 99. So 3 hours after I ate the fruit, my glucose was back at 68. It peaked at 102. And just now it was 98. So it's staying higher longer, I guess. Yeah. Because it's been 2 hours since I ate. Anyway, and that's what we want to look at. So that might be a problem for me. If my area under the curve is big, I have a big, long curve, that's not good. You want it to go up and come down quickly. But I had that tea. I actually need to put that on there. So that's probably why it stayed up, because I had this. So I did another experiment with sucralose. This is a sugar-free chai latte made with sucralose. Sucralose will spike insulin. Okay. So, I knew that. Well, I knew that it was probably so, but that's probably why my sugar's still up. So anyway, I've had one person tell me that they were able to get pregnant after joining my group and following the advice. And it's the best testimonial that I've ever had. I would like to have a whole fucking slew of pregnancies coming out of my group. Unfortunately, most of the people who friend me on Facebook are dudes. So please tell all your fat lady friends to join. But seriously, I would like, women are kind of my wheelhouse because we have our unique hormonal issues. We deal with the infertility stuff. And so I would really like to help your wives and girlfriends, your friends, and fellow shitposters. I really want to, I want to see women not waste their fertility. That's the dream. Because I did. And it's brief, it's fleeting, it's beautiful. It depends. Just happy to be in the 100 and teens. Blood glucose, that's fasting, that's high. So yeah, where are you at when you're fasting? If you're not fasting, you should be. If you are waking up in the morning and your blood glucose is in the 100 teens, that's not good. It should be lower. If you eat late, especially if you eat carbs late, your blood glucose will stay high like all night, and we don't want that. Mine, Cole Robinson, the snake diet guy, he yells about this a lot, about how you should have pretty fucking low. Dude, I don't know. It depends on when you're eating. Like, there's blood glucose fasted and there's postprandial blood glucose, and they're very different things. There's blood glucose after you work out. I mean, it just depends on you. It depends on your pattern. It depends on how long it stays up, how quickly it goes down, But Cole talks about how your glucose should stay low. If you're walking around fasting, you're in ketosis. There's no reason for your glucose to be high. And you see that sometimes with people who have been in ketosis for years, that it goes up and kind of stays in the 100s because you're welcome. Because it's because they become physiologically insulin resistant, maybe, and they don't know how to use glucose anymore. So apparently I'm not one of those people because my shit is low. My shit is, it stays like around the high 60s, and then it goes up. The highest it's been is 121. The lowest it's been is 41. All of my peaks, average, and adaptability is at a 10. My variability is at an 8, like this, my score. But I've only had it on for like a day and a half, so I don't know. According to this, I haven't talked to the dietitian yet. She might tell me, your blood glucose stays low because your insulin is staying high, but I really seriously doubt that because I'm fasted. My insulin can't be high when I've had nothing but water for, many, 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 many hours. So anyway, we'll see on that. Women trying to get pregnant, remember that insulin is your enemy. You need to cut your carbs. You need to fast. You need to be off of any kind of hormonal oral contraception. That is garbage. You need to choose your doctor very carefully. And you need to be working with a doctor who is integrative or functional medicine, who is fasting friendly, who understands the importance of insulin and the role that it plays in your health. These doctors are not easy to find. The best thing that I could tell you to do is to educate yourself so that you can be your own advocate, because they are not going to know what they're talking about a lot of the time. That's just the sad truth. I wish that we could depend on our doctors. We do, we run to them and we want answers, and then the answers they give us are pure shit. So, and I've suffered so much at the hands of Western medicine that I can't even put it into words. You need to learn this stuff on your own. You need to learn it for yourself. Please join my group. I post articles and the doctors who do get it, they're rare, but they're so important and they're so helpful. People like Jason Fung, people like Pradeep Jamnadas. I posted their videos. Paul Saladino posts his videos. These are all MDs. And once they do get it, they're very powerful because they have that black background in medicine and also like with Fung and Pramadas, like decades of clinical practice. And it's extremely valuable. You can learn a lot from them. Gary Talbs is another one. He's not a physician, he's a journalist, and Nina Teicholz. These are journalists who have studied the history of nutrition and how nutrition science has gone wrong. It's really fascinating. Everything that you think you know about nutrition is wrong. Please educate yourself. Please take your health and your fertility into your own hands. There's a great book. I forget who wrote it. It's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. You can get it on Amazon. This is more of like the direct like cycle stuff and charting and understanding your cervical mucus and the phases of your cycle. This will really help you. You might not be infertile at all. You just might be timing intercourse wrong. You might be ovulating at a different time than you think. That will help you. But above all, your metabolic health is the key to your fertility. So get it under control. Get your insulin under control. Get your diet under control. Eat real food. Don't eat garbage. Don't eat low fat, please. Don't cut your fucking calories. Don't think that getting on a treadmill and getting fucking MyFitnessPal and logging 1,200 calories is going to get you pregnant. It's not. You need to lose the excess body fat. You need to do it right. You need to not just starve yourself with calorie counting. You need to actually fix your hormonal imbalance. You need to fix your hormones. I can help you do it. Join my group, Primal Weight Loss. I'm also on YouTube. I will link my channel. Actually, it's in the announcements on my page or the pinned, featured, whatever, at the top of the group. There's some videos there. This will go on my YouTube. I'm on Instagram at Fast Carnivore, Twitter at Fast Carnivore. And you can also DM me with any questions. Message me at fastcarnivore@gmail.com. All right. I hope you guys have an awesome day. Bye.